Personally just got goosebumps. That's pretty embarrassing by reading aloud to myself and a camera, but hi guys, I'm Amy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally filming for you all my favorite books of 2017. So if you want to know about the books that I just couldn't get enough of and really made my reading year, then go ahead and keep on watching. Now, I'm just gonna make the quick disclaimer here that these books are in no particular order. I don't think I could order them even if I wanted to, just because that's not how my brain works, I guess. And I have a little bit of everything. I have a classic, I have children's books, I have a middle grade book, I have YA, I have nonfiction. It's a basket full of it all, and I just couldn't compare them against one another if I wanted to. But these are the books that I just really, really loved, and in order to kind of give you a little bit of a glimpse of why I love these books, I've selected some passages from some of them to read to you all that were just especially special to me, or important, I guess you could say. Not the most eloquent way of me stating that, but you know, it is what it is, and this is a channel where we just go with the flow. But let's get into it. I'm going to start off with a very obvious favorite for me, and that is My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. I do not have my copy at the moment because I have lent it to a friend because I think everyone should read it. This is the story about Elsa, a 7-year-old girl who is mourning the loss of her grandmother, and she just has this way of looking at the world that you wouldn't think a 7-year-old could look at the world, but after you've read it, you're like, that's completely possible. This is a whimsical book, it's a sad book, it's funny, it's also dealing with really hard emotions like anger and grief, and it is wonderful. And Frederick Bachman is an incredible writer, and if you haven't read him, you should. The next book I want to mention is another book that I do not own because I checked it out from the library, but I do hope to own it one day, and that is The Emperors Ostrich by Julie Berry. I saw Matthew Sharapa talk about this book on his channel and watched his review. I will link that down below if you'd like to check it out. But this is a wonderful middle grade story about a young milkmaid who loses her cow and has to go find her, and an adventure ensues, and she meets lots of crazy characters along the way, including an ostrich, and it is fantastic. It's fun, it's fairy tale-esque, and if you just need a pick-me-up and a great book to read in a sitting or two, pick this one up, guys. You'll love it, and you should also read it to your children because they will love it as well. And for the illustrated children's book that I had mentioned, that is Gaston by Kelly DiPucchio and illustrated by Christian Robinson. I can't get enough of this story. I love reading this story to my preschoolers and any child that walks into my home. It is about a little French bulldog who's being raised in a family of poodles, and the illustrations are out of this world. I am obsessed with this illustration style. There is also a companion book called Antoinette, which is a character from the story as well, and it's great. It's wonderful. It makes my heart just so very happy, and just every home should have it, regardless of the ages of the people in said home, because this book is just too perfect for this world. Now, like I mentioned, some of these books, and by some of these books I mean the rest of the books I'm going to mention, I do have little blurbs selected to read to you guys, but the first book I wanted to talk about is The Apartment by Greg Baxter. You probably haven't heard me chat about this book since I read it at the beginning of December and kind of went on a little hiatus for a couple months from BookTube, and this is a story that is about an unnamed narrator written in a constant stream of consciousness. I really struggle saying that phrase for whatever reason, and it takes place over the course of a day where he is looking for an apartment in an unknown, unspecified European city with a woman from said city that he just knows kind of well, but she's helping him navigate it and find an apartment. And that's essentially the premise of what is happening in this story, but you get to see a little bit about this man and about his past experiences. He fought in Afghanistan, he's an American, and he really doesn't have a sense of home. And this book approaches political topics and humankind topics that I just really appreciated the discussion of, and a little bit of, if I can find it, just give me 1 second, I removed the post-it note already. There we go. And the little bit I wanted to share with you, just I think really sums up this book and what is explored in this book is, "Now mankind," said the historian, "sinks forever into the despair caused by humanism and liberalism, which are nothing more than doctrines of flight from man's real nature. He fights wars to spread enlightenment, democracy, freedom, rights, but what he spreads is a despair of which he is entirely unaware." And this book is wonderful. I've never heard anybody talk about it, but you really should go read it, especially if you are currently in a very snowy place, because they're looking for an apartment in the freezing cold and nasty, slushy snow and ice, and so very atmospheric as well. I have one short story slash novella, and I'm sure this will come as a surprise to none of you, and that is Shop Girl by Steve Martin. I bought this book at a thrift store, having no idea that the author was the Steve Martin, as in the comedian and actor, and this is a very, very low-key story about a young woman named Mirabelle, who's just sort of letting life happen to her, and she just goes through the motions. She also struggles from depression, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well, because Steve Martin's writing is just really crisp and clear and concise and matter of fact, and that made this book really, really refreshing. And over the course of this book, Mirabelle meets an older man named Ray Porter, and they start a relationship, and that's what this story is about. Nothing much else happens, but it is a fantastic story with a not so perfect ending that I didn't even realize that I needed. And I cannot recommend this book enough. I do have a book review about this book. I will link it up here for you all, but just know that this book is worth all the little bits of time that will take you to read it. As for the blurb, like I mentioned, she struggles from depression, and I just really appreciated this really clear description of the fact that depression doesn't have a magic button. The depression she battles is not the newly acquired symptom of a young woman now living in Los Angeles on her own. It was the first set in the Bow in Vermont, where she grew up, and fired as a companion arrow that she has traveled with her ever since. With the drug, she is generally able to corner it and keep it separate from her daily life. There are black stretches, however, when she is unable to move from her bed. She takes full advantage of the sick days that are built into her work allowances at Neiman's. Pick this book up, guys. It's so worth it. And don't be afraid because it's a celebrity author, because damn can this guy write. This next book, I am completely shocked that I'm even including on this list, because I almost DNF'd it and I loved it more than I ever thought possible. And it has been the book that has probably stayed with me the most of the books that I've read last year, and that is The Butcher's Hook by Janet Ellis. This is a dark, creepy, morbid story about a 19-year-old girl named Anne. Yes, Anne, who is really unhappy with her lot in life. She is of an upper middle class 18th century family in London, and she's unhappy with everything. And that is until she meets Fub, the butcher's apprentice, and she basically becomes instantly in love and obsessed with this particular person. And this is about her relationship with him and the action she takes due to his presence in her life. And this book is creepy and it's weird. I've already said that, but if you haven't read it, you should. This cover is also gorgeous, and I really hope Janet Ellis comes out with more books, because I want more of this kind of book in my life. Which is shocking to me, because I never would have guessed I would enjoy this book. Now, the blurb that I picked from this book actually is on the first page, because I just think it really sets the tone for the rest of the story, and you just somewhat know what you're getting into. I go to her now only because I should. My glass is full to the brim with sorrow, and there is no room for another drop, whether sweet or sour. This is my 19th summer, but I have known only 13 happy years to this date, and that is only if I include my early childhood in the reckoning, back when, in all honesty, I own no accountable state of mind. Without that, it is a very poor tally. Read this book. I promise you won't be disappointed. This next book is one of the first books that I talked about on my channel, so if you have been with me from the very beginning, first of all, thank you, and second of all, again, you're not going to be surprised by this, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This story is a story that just spoke directly to my soul. Nothing much happens in this story, except for that Francie grew up. But it is a beautiful growing up story that is real and raw, and I think that's largely because Betty Smith originally intended this book to be a biography, an autobiography about herself, but the editors and publishers wanted her to instead make it more of a novel, and she did, and it's perfect. This book is wonderful. Her prose is phenomenal and yet so real and raw. And I didn't mention this book takes place in the 1920s, I believe. And she's growing up in Brooklyn in a not so well-to-do area. Now, I could have picked 50 passages from this book to share with you all, but this is probably one of my favorites and just really, really resonated with me. Dear God, she prayed, let me be something every minute of every hour of my life. Let me be gay, let me be sad. Let me be cold, let me be warm. Let me be hungry, have too much to eat. Let me be ragged or well-dressed. Let me be sincere, be deceitful. Let me be truthful, let me be a liar. Let me be honorable and let me sin. Only let me be something every blessed minute. And when I sleep, let me dream all the time so that not one little piece of living is ever lost. I personally just got goosebumps. That's pretty embarrassing by reading aloud to myself and a camera, but oh, guys, just read this book. If anyone wants to do a book club kind of reading situation here of this book, I would gladly reread it with you all. If you have any interest in that, of me potentially leading something like that, leave a comment down below. Let me know, because I need to get back to this book sooner rather than later because it's just too amazing. I have one nonfiction book of the year and yet another book that I just absolutely gushed about and have a review for, and that is Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson, a funny book about horrible things. And I didn't know how much I needed this book. Jenny Lawson is known as the Bloggess. She has a very popular blog under that name, and her blogging life kind of led to her first book. Let's pretend that didn't happen, or something along those lines. I'll leave it down below. Sorry, don't have it off the top of my head, but this is her second book, and it is amazing. Jenny Lawson suffers from way too many that any one person should ever have to handle mental illnesses, including depression, OCD, she self-harms, and that's just to name a few of the things that she struggles with. She takes medications, she goes to therapy all the time, and she struggles every day to live a life as normal as she wants. Now, if you've read this book, you know that Jenny is freaking hilarious and absolutely wonderful. This book will literally make you laugh out loud. I don't laugh out loud at books very often. It made me laugh out loud regularly. But at the same time, Jenny approached topics that are hard, scary topics that can often be taboo, especially here in the United States concerning mental illness, and I appreciated the candidness in which she discussed them. But also, she wasn't looking for sympathy or pity. She was telling you what her experience has been like. And that she's not even necessarily sorry that it is her life. She's just telling you about it. And that meant everything to me as a person who also struggles with mental illnesses. Most of you probably know depression and anxiety are something that I work against, however you want to phrase that, every day. And reading a book where I saw so much of myself in it was truly phenomenal, especially a book that is from a real person. And the little bit that I wanted to share with you kind of sums up how I feel about my illnesses in a lot of ways. If everything is perfect and I'm miserable, then is this as good as it gets? And the answer is no. It gets better. You get better. You learn to appreciate the fact that what drives you is very different from what you're told should make you happy. You learn that it's okay to prefer your personal idea of heaven, live tweeting zombie movies from under a blanket of kittens, rather than someone else's idea that fame, fortune, parties are the pinnacle we should all reach for. And there's something surprisingly freeing about that. And again, this is another book. I like scribbled up one side and down the other in this book, and I think this is a book that everyone can benefit from reading, whether you have mental illnesses or not. But just, guys, read it. And it's funny. It's so funny. Like, you're gonna laugh. I promise you're gonna laugh. And I mean, there's a raccoon on the cover, a taxidermied raccoon, which is actually her own personal taxidermied raccoon. So, I mean, do you need any other, like, motivation to read this book? To be honest, another book I am totally shocked that made this list, and we're gonna ignore that Loki just ran across the room and made a bunch of noise, is a YA book that I don't even know why I picked it up, but I'm so glad that I did, because I don't read a lot of YA, and my experiences with YA in 2017 largely weren't awesome, but this reading experience was fantastic. And that is My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. And this is the story of Lady Jane Grey, who historically was on the throne of England for 9 days. And this is a reimagined, somewhat magical realism spin on that person. And it's freaking a barrel of fun, and I adore it. This book takes place from three perspectives. Jane, her husband, oh geez, I can't remember his name, Gifford, and her cousin, King Charles, who would have been King Henry VIII's son, who ascended the throne after him. And it's, like I said, there's a magical realism spin. Basically, they're these people who can turn into animals, and they're largely frowned upon, but being more accepted, it's kind of one of those things where you're not really sure where you're at with it. And it just makes for such a fun element in this book. There is a love story in it that is absolutely adorable and sweet, and it's not love at first sight. Thank you, thank you, thank you for not having love at first sight. More books need to have that in it. But I'm gonna stop gushing about it, because again, I have a book review of this as well. But the little bit I wanted to share is the despair in books was a distant, safe thing. She thought she'd understood the depth of the emotion as she read through the pages of her beloved books, her life touching those of men and women long dead. She'd felt for them, cried for them, tried to breathe for them when they no longer breathed. And then she'd been able to close the book and place it on its shelf, the words trapped between the leather covers. This book is fun. It's an adventure. If you love history even a little bit, pick it up. Just pick it up. And it's a quick read. It looks big. It's quick. I promise it's quick. Just read it. Read it. And last, but most certainly not least, because this book will have a special place in my heart, probably for always. And I couldn't stop talking about it for, really, I still can't stop talking about it. That is The Tsar of Love and Techno by Anthony Marra. This is technically a short story collection that all revolve around people living in Russia and having Russian connections at different times in history. And the beautiful thing about this book is all of those stories are interwoven and connected in a variety of different ways that makes this book read like a novel, and it is beautiful. I used, I don't know if you can tell, an entire like tabby thing, brand new, to tab pages of this book. I couldn't stop interacting with this text, and Anthony Marra's prose is something that I didn't know was possible. It's beautiful, it's hard, and it's gorgeous. I cannot recommend this book enough. And my husband also listened to it on Audible and really, really enjoyed the Audible edition, so that's another way that you can enjoy this book. But this book looks at things, just humankind, politics, government, society, relationships, community, you name it. This book talks about it, and it handles it well. He did not bite off more than he can chew, which is shocking to me, but just know that this book is great. Now, because this video is already incredibly long, I'm going to very quickly read the little bit that I picked from this, which is taken from the very first story from this collection, which is The Leopard. And that is, by this point I had moved from India ink to airbrushing. It was no longer enough to obliterate a traitor's face. The inky mask acknowledged that a traitor could exist, an assertion that quickly becomes a traitorous act in itself. History is the error we are forever correcting. I cannot explain how much I love this book in words, but I did do a book review. Link it up there. Shameless plugging over and over and over again. But there you go, guys. This video is really long because I've been working really hard to keep my videos shorter and have been succeeding. But when you are asked to talk about all your favorite books in one video, it makes it really hard because you want to talk about it all. But let me know if you guys have read any of these books and what you thought about them, good or bad. I love discussions like that. I'm not afraid to hear why you potentially potentially hated said book I just mentioned, but I want to hear about why you loved it too. Also, what were some of your favorite books this year? I would love some recommendations. I'm always looking for more, but thank you so much for watching, you guys. I appreciate it more than you could ever possibly know. 2017 was great. I started my booktube channel and I'm so thankful for the interactions and friendships that I have been able to have because of this channel and me standing here talking to a camera while my dogs take naps. But if you like this video, please like it, and if you loved it, please subscribe, and we'll see you in my next video. Happy reading.